I think Ather has generally been in the Indian ecosystem. We've been the most startup out there. We've sort of gone against most startup wisdoms, recommendations. There was no concept of build fast, fail fast. You can't with vehicles. And this was radically new concept for most of the ecosystem, most engineers, most designers, and most investors. A startup that is basically saying he was pura vehicle develop kar lenge, which will cost like $100 million and maybe 300 people ka team over several years. Then we will launch and see kya hota hai, right? Like that's thoda mind-boggling. Most people are expecting run a pilot, get some feedback, do all that stuff. We did a bunch of it, but nothing that can qualify as really testing out the market.
Today we had Tarun Mehta on the pod. Tarun is the co-founder and CEO of Ather Energy. He's also known as the Elon Musk of India for introducing EV scooters to the country. Ather is India's first smart and connected electric scooters, often referred to as the Tesla of two-wheelers in India. Ather is contributing to the growth of the EV ecosystem in India and inspiring the adoption of electric mobility. We discussed various topics on the podcast, including what was the founding story of Ather, who was the first believer in Tarun and Ather, what kept him going despite the challenges he faced, the role of the government in promoting EVs, and what policy Tarun would create to promote EVs if given the opportunity, why India is poised to become the world leader in EVs, what's his day like, who is he outside of work, and much more. Now I bring you Tarun Mehta. All right, Tarun, welcome to the show.
Hey, great to be here, Shiva.
Man, I'm excited about it. I remember we first met back in 2019. We were just talking about it, and I
Yeah.
think we were taking a walk in the parking lot, and I saw tons of Aethers there.
Yeah.
Now, fast forward to 2022, I'm sure a lot has changed. So excited to unpack a bunch of those things. But maybe a starting point would be, Tarun, what was the founding story of Aether?
So, yeah, ours is a classical garage startup founding story. Swapna and I go back a long way. We've been together since 2007 when we
Yeah.
started college. And we're in the same hostel, we're in the same department. We did our internships together, we did a ton of our projects together. Second year of college, he started working on something called the Stirling engine and got very fascinated and excited about engines and by extension, the energy markets. I got pulled into it about 6 months later, and since 2009, that's been a dream of ours. We've been calling ourselves Ather Energy since 2009. We're not building electric vehicles; we were building engines back then. But the passion and the vision around doing something in the energy space is a very old one for us. Um, Spent 3 years of college trying to get that right, did not succeed with them. We built the Stirling engines. From my understanding, we built the only functional Stirling engines in academia in India. We built single cylinder, and then we went all the way up to four-cylinder engines. Uh, Learned a lot about how to build together. Learned a lot about how to do hardware, how to do market research, how to think of consumers, how to think about pricing, even how to fundraise a little bit, but could not start up. So Ather Energy, as we conceptualized it, could not actually start up as a formal company building Stirling engines because we kind of realized that building these engines was going to be damn hard. Graduated, took up different jobs, did not lose the excitement around building an energy company eventually. Even as I was taking the job, we were filing a lot of patents, by the way. Both of us were building a lot of things while we were at college. We may just be the highest patent filers at IIT Madras ever. I think we filed 6 patents while we were still at college. And one of the patents that we filed just after graduation was around batteries. And I and another friend of mine had filed it. Wanted to do something with them. My first job, I had a lot of time. To give you a sense of how much time I had, for the first 4 months, I was not allotted a computer. It was still the files were still moving in the system. So 4 महीने तक computer नहीं है बंदे के पास. क्या ही काम करेगा as an engineer. So I would basically take long walks in the campus and read a lot about electric vehicles and batteries. Got pretty fascinated. Just a month or two in, got pretty fascinated. So I was still in Chennai. So both of us were from IIT Madras. So in Chennai. I took up the job in Chennai. So on weekends, I would travel back to, on Friday evenings, typically I would travel back to IIT Madras. A friend of mine was pursuing some research there. So he used to stay in the campus and used to work out of the lab, my old lab that I was a student in. So I would turn up there on Friday evenings. Nobody would stop me because they would still think I'm still the old student because they did
Mhm.
not realize I had graduated out. So I would just sort of walk in on Friday nights and sleep there. Friday night, Saturday night, I would just sleep there, stay there, shower at friends' place here and there, and just hang around in the campus, reading about batteries, trying to build some battery packs, just trying to do something. A few months in, I became very convinced that boss battery build कर सकते हैं. Building a lithium-ion battery pack is something that as engineers we can crack. I
Mhm.
think there's a very big market for building batteries for electric vehicles.
Mhm.
EV wave आने वाला है. So went ahead with that and called up Swapnil, got him excited, pitched to him ki boss, we should build batteries. And if we build batteries for electric vehicles, and we could also build the charging infrastructure required for these vehicles, I've done the research. I think all of this is solvable. None of this is inventions. It's all basically good old fashioned engineering and product management wala kaam. Both
Mhm.
of us love that. We should
Mhm.
totally do this company called Ather Energy that will build these batteries and charging.
Mhm.
He was just looking for an opportunity. So literally 6 months of us being in the corporate world, we resigned, came back, and we started building this. And the way we did it is so good old fashioned garage startup. We went back to the same lab that I was sort of sneaking in. We convinced two of our professors, Professor RKK and Professor Sandeepan, in the department that, sir, we want to build stuff. We don't get an opportunity to build in the corporate world outside. You trained us as engineers to actually build things, not just write cat and become an MBA. So would you help us? Would you
Mhm.
let us just hang around in the campus? They agreed, funnily, almost instantly they agreed. And next day, both of us had resigned. There's some more detail to it, but yeah, broad story, we resigned pretty much the next day. And month seven, we were back in the campus trying to build these batteries, talking to customers all the time. And Ather was still not formally incorporated.
Mhm.
We were actually, frankly, more excited about the idea of building this than the idea of starting up. We're not still ultra sure that we would actually start up, but we were very sure we were building this. A few months in, kind of realized that we can't just build the battery packs. We don't have OEMs, we don't have vehicle companies who will buy these batteries. So the solution obviously then is to build those vehicles also.
Mhm.
If you're not getting customers, become the customer.
Mhm.
So we flipped and we said, listen, company start karte hai, but we'll now build the entire vehicle, not just batteries. So by October 2013, Ather Energy became a vehicle manufacturing startup, not just a battery startup. That's the founding story.
Gotcha, man. So Tarun, when I think the plant was seeded back in 2009, and
2009, yeah.
then over time, things change, and it was mostly you were just against all the odds, right? Ecosystem wasn't there, OEMs were not building EV vehicle, infrastructure was not there in terms of charging and all that. So couple of questions here. One, who was the first believer in you and Aether? And while you were building, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you launched your first product in 2016.
Yeah.
You're already against all the odds possible out there, and you're dealing with tons of uncertainties. What really kept you going?
I think Ether has generally been in the Indian ecosystem. We've been the most unstartup startup out there. We've sort of gone against most startup wisdoms and recommendations. There was no concept of build fast, fail fast. You can't with vehicles, and this was radically new concept for most of the ecosystem, most engineers, most designers, and most investors. A startup that is basically saying कि बस पूरा vehicle develop कर लेंगे, which will cost like $100 million and maybe 300 people ka team over several years. Then we will launch and see क्या होता है, right? Like that's थोड़ा mind boggling. Most people are expecting run a pilot, get some feedback, do all that stuff. We did a bunch of it, but nothing that can qualify as really testing out the market. Um, a very long gestation period, tons of money front loaded. and doing something that's firmly in the territory of big company experience, right? We want to do hardcore engineering. We want to do a ton of testing, for which you need a ton of experience. You need really need to sit down and write standards of how to run testing. You have to set up labs for the first time. This kind of stuff you expect Mercedes Benz karega, you expect Daimler karega, you expect Ford will do it,
Yeah.
Tesla will do it now, but you don't expect startups to do it. So
Yeah.
Ether sort of went against the grain on most of these things. People who believed in us, hence, were mostly non-startup types. So the first earliest believers, I would say, were three professors. Two of the professors that I said, RKK and Dr. Sandeepan, and then Professor Junjunwala, again at IIT Madras. These were three earliest believers who sort of backed us, supported us, encouraged us. The first money came from an alumni of ours, V. Srinivasan, who himself was a founder at a company in the Valley, Aerospike. He was the first 25 lakh rupees in the company. The first real money, however, came serious money came from Sachin and Vinny Bansal. They put in $1 million between themselves in December 2014, and that, I would say, absolutely changed the direction of the company. V. Srinivasan sort of ensured that we could continue building what we were doing, but it was still garage stuff, right? We're still hanging out on the campus. Like 25 lakhs, 40 lakhs can't let you build something serious. And did not give us enough to get to Bangalore, but it gave us enough to survive for 1 year somehow and not die. Sachin and Benny did two things. First, they gave us $1 million, and that was the interest on that money was what we were spending monthly at that point. So it just boggled our mind. Second, that certainly gave us startup credibility. So remember, until this point, we are a few people sitting out of a lab in IIT Madras or research park in IIT Madras. We're not seen as startup material. If we turn up in fundraise pitches, we are like the paria out there. Like, kya bolo yaar? Research करना research करो. Why are you coming to fundraise here? ठीक है, so nobody would welcome us, and nobody knew about us. But getting the investment from Sachin and Benny certainly put us on the map. Was like Flipkart founders putting in the largest check till now. Sachin joining the board of the company. What's happening? This company is serious, and that did make a difference because 4 months later, Tiger came in and invested $12 million. If Sachin Bini had not put in the million, Tiger would not have put in the 12. And I think Ather would have become a very different company, probably a very small and uh, a very different, a shadow of its current self, if those steps had not happened. So these were some of the earliest believers.
Love it. And Tarun, I typically in my friend circle, man, I usually, describe you and Aether as really, Tesla slash Musk of India. And why I say that is, you've already described, right? Against the odds, no one is doing what you're doing. People are actually probably advising you against it. You've graduated from IIT Madras, do something, man, make money. And but yeah, now you are at a place where you have not only succeeded, you have forced other OEMs to get into the space, right?
Yes.
And with that, Tarun, as an outsider observer, I've been seeing that Indian government has been, promoting the adoption of EVs in India. Few parts to it. One, what's something that they've got it right? Uh, on the flip side, something they could do better. Or in other words, let's say, Tarun, man, you're in the office. You have a chance to form and implement a policy. What
Hmm.
would that be?
Things that the government has gone right. I think what they've gone really right is I think the government's kind of understood. I think policymakers in general have understood, whether it is a political class or it is the bureaucratic class, that you need to put something in the limelight for it to really start catching on. I think this is a fairly new thing in India. I don't think this has historically happened a lot. It's happening a lot now across the spectrum, not just EV, but
Mhm.
EV may obviously first hand experience I can see it. Obviously, incentives kicked in But even before incentives kicked in, even before subsidies kicked in, the amount of noise, the amount of public goodwill that the government generated around electric is just unprecedented.
Yeah.
It's unprecedented, I think, globally. I think in US, for example, it's not like the government went out of its way to say, "Ki boss electric karo." Government like did some support here and there. Maybe actually they gave meaningful support. In fact, arguably they gave bigger support than the Indian government can afford to. But it was the customer perception changed very slowly, right? Like we all think of Tesla as this crazy big success, but remember, like it's been trying to do that since 2004, right? Like they found the success in 2013 after Model S showed some promise. So it took like a decade for Model S to find some meaningful success. Okay. India में government starting 2018 really amped up the conversation. 2019, I would say, really started focusing on electric, and it changed customer perception massively. Like when we set up our first experience center, we were really paranoid that everybody would think electric is a toy, and we went out of our way to sort of change that perception. Like investing a lot in a beautiful experience center, giving high end technology on the product, on the experience, changing the perception. Like to the point that an overwhelming feedback that Ather gets is it's a European brand, because it's very difficult to sort of believe that this is not imported. Uh, and that's because it was we were worried, we were paranoid about it. But the government kind of changed the perception, and customers started believing that electric is the future. Obviously, everybody's talking about electric. Gadkari is talking about electric. Piyush Goyal is talking about electric. Prime Minister goes in the independence speech and says electric. मतलब electric तो आ गया फिर, मतलब this is the future. That I think the government nailed very, 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 very well. Right. The second part was a significant incentive boost starting 2021, which kind of put the industry on a super fast track. It's at least pulled the industry forward by 2 years. I think the current penetration levels that you see would not have been possible before 2025 with the old incentive system. So these two things I think government got really right. In fact, I would say third thing, the fact that policymakers also have been able to think through that India needs high quality electric vehicles and India can become a global hub for light electric vehicles. This is very, very, very mature thinking. Like mostly, I don't think I could have imagined Indian policymakers to take such a bold stance.
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, otherwise, typically the solution is who can we invite to come and do something here, right? Like
Yeah.
invite Tesla. The fact that the government went against Tesla at some level is pretty courageous. What the government hasn't gone really right. Well, that's a classical problem of bureaucracy. Long term visibility of support. That's super hard for our system to still get nailed down. So what you typically know is, well, there is an incentive today, there's a subsidy today for now. What happens 6 months later, we'll have to see.
Yeah.
That makes predictability impossible. That makes planning very difficult. And that basically forces everybody to be a little conservative in their planning. Because if you overinvest, you could suddenly get wiped out if the incentives get pulled back.
Hmm.
Because otherwise, there's no profitability in the sector still. So I think that's something, I think there's a lot of work that could still happen. But it's a sign of an evolving thing. So I'm okay. Yeah, those are the two things that they've gotten right, and something they could still do a better job of.
Got it. And seems like if you're invited to PMO office, this is what you'll be working on, where you can give surety. Okay, this is how the policy will play out for these many years.
Yes, see, because EV is not like is not like a short term opportunistic thing for India. EV is one of those places. It's in my opinion, EV is the semiconductor opportunity for India. In my opinion, semiconductors actually is still like a 15-20 year old, like an early thing for India. Like the amount of, like, US is putting a $50 billion subsidy for semiconductors in US. China is doing $100 billion subsidy for semiconductors in China. We can't win the semiconductor battle, right? Like with that kind of an investment.
Hmm.
We can't win the AI battle practically today. It's just too early to win that battle. But EV is one of those areas where light electric vehicles, India is already the global player. Here, $5-10 billion changes the industry trajectory completely, and we've seen that play out last year. So here is a place where if the government puts its credibility on the line and has a vision that we want to basically build the largest light electric vehicle ecosystem globally, We want everything here. We want cells here, we want vehicles here, we want all manufacturers here, we want the largest charging infra players here, we want the largest carbon credit market here, we want the largest financing play happening out of India, we want
Mhm.
the largest export economy for light electric vehicles out of India. All of that is already in works. But that, if you want to play that out, you've got to have like a decade or a two decade view. This is how it'll play out.
Got it. Yeah, I think you did tweet about it a few months back where you said, almost nobody realizes how large a lead Indian EV companies have over their global counterparts.
Oh, absolutely. I think the number of engineers in working in the EV tool industry in India shadows out the rest of the world. This just like, and I think that's the number one metric for me. How many engineers do you have on this problem statement? India absolutely dominates that space.
Gotcha. And Tarun, we'll switch gears here
Yeah.
and we'll talk about angel investing. And the way I think about angel investing is I think the founders and operators are really the core of the ecosystem. Why I say that is A, first, they are building a company. Secondly, they're supporting their friends and others with both capital and expertise. Like in your case, where Sachin and Benny came in and invested,
Yeah.
they kind of like validated who you are and what Aether is, right? And in same way, I think you're giving back as well. Maybe we can talk about what led you into angel investing and what's something, the best thing that you get out of it.
What? So I've not done a lot of angel investments. I've only begun doing a few now. Generally, it has kept me pretty busy, and I've tried to avoid anything else. But there have been a few good friends who recently started up, and they're working on some very interesting problem statements. So decided to sort of support them in whatever way either me or Swapnil could, either of us could. Um, Recently invested in a startup called Appliance. They are building appliance. They're building smart devices for cooking. And there's a but the thing is not just the hardware element. Obviously, there's a common thing there, and the founder is a very old Ather ex Ather colleague of ours. But the fact that there's a larger opportunity that the company sees, and that's something that we generally like. Um, Generally at Ather, most of us, in fact, it's enshrined in the company values. Know your true north, and we really celebrate having like a 10-year or 20-year view of everything.
Mhm.
Uh, so startups that typically have that kind of a vision, we like. If there's a hardware story happening underlying, it's even better because there's something we can meaningfully actually even add value on.
Mhm.
Uh, and typically in India play, those are some of the things we like.
Got it. And Tarun, seems like there's this one value which is embedded in you, thinking long term.
Hmm.
You've displayed that through your career building Aether. Now you recently just said you like this idea and company because they're thinking long term. Where is that coming from?
I think the number of years we spent in dreaming about a startup without actually doing anything really. So okay, we did a lot, but basically year year 2, year 3 of college till our last final years, we spent almost 3 years trying to start Aether Energy as a company, um, around this entire engines idea. And while engines was hard, frankly, IIT gives you a lot of time. Like I don't think people appreciate how much free time you can get if once you clear IIT. We got a lot of free time. So the amount of thinking that we got together
Mhm.
on. So like back then we used to write such long form views on energy as an industry, on how this will play out over the next 30, 40 years. In fact, in the company mission statement, we wrote down our mission as a company is to reduce the cost of energy. So it's such a long term view, and all this happened because we got all this time when we were still at college. We were still thinking about all of this. Even the first year or two, I would say, of starting Aether, we were in a cocoon, and I say that very positively for that phase. We were not in a startup hub. We are not sitting out of an HSR core mangla. We were not meeting. We are not turning up at startup events, startup meets all the time. We did not have access to any of the standard startup yarn. it allowed us to form our own philosophies. Like we got at least 2 years sitting in isolation in Chennai, meeting nobody except doing our own thing and just writing our own views again and again, and having really long form debates about it. So by that point, by 2015, this has become the culture of the company. Listen, like we don't do things if we don't believe in it long term.
Mhm.
We don't love pivots. We don't love unnecessary experimentation. We like taking our time, forming a really really deep view on one thing, and then generally just sticking to it. And it worked for us in a sense. We did the same thing for Ether 450. We had a very clear view of how this product should be, how it should be built, and we were very confident if built this way, it'll differentiate Ether massively and it will kickstart EVs in India. It took us 2 years longer than we estimated. It took us almost $100 million than more than we estimated. It took us 300 more people than we estimated. But at the end, the first product that Ather built changed the EV landscape in India. That was the first product to use a touchscreen Android dashboard anywhere in the world. And today, India is the largest hub for dashboards on two wheelers anywhere. Like India, in fact, India is the only market that uses touchscreen dashboards, which is mind-boggling. You would imagine that only European or an Asian market would experiment with something like that, not an Indian market. We're the first ones to put out this performance spec, and that's now the market standard. So because culturally we have seen that play out, it comes very naturally to most old timers at Ether that listen, have a longer term view. The company will bet on something even if it takes 2 3 years to fructify, but have a long term view. Don't have like a 3 month 4 month view.
Got it. Stay at it long enough, and eventually you'll get what you deserve. And Tarun, my co-pilot has been bugging me, man.
Yeah,
He's been knocking me. He's like, "Hey, let me get in." So I'll allow him now.
sure.
And so he's asking, Tarun, what's your day like?
My day kind of changes a lot depending on the phase of the company. There are typically three different phases. One is the operations phase of the company, when you want to be a little bit like a manager, and there you want to have a little bit of a set discipline, right? You want to have a set schedule. You have reviews that happen with a very very fixed frequency. You have catch ups that happen very fixed frequency, and all you're trying to do in that phase is just keep expanding. This is the one to end journey, right? Keep expanding what's already working. You don't need a ton of innovation on those topics at that point. And in that phase, typically having a set routine, having a set cadence to everything makes has an enormous payoff. Then there's a second phase, which is a little bit of the 0 to 1 phase, right? Which is, sorry, actually, before that, the second phase is more customer facing, more outside world facing, where you don't have a very fixed routine, but it's a fairly action packed day. So, what you're doing is you're going out, you're meeting customers, you're meeting suppliers, you're meeting investors, you're meeting media, you're taking the word outside quite a lot. So, you're traveling quite a lot in this phase, and you're outside the office a lot in this phase, right? And then there's a third phase, which is a 0 to 1 phase. That's the phase where you have very little by way of a calendar. That typically comes once in 2 years, in my experience. So every 2 years, you get to that phase where for a couple of months, few months, your calendar takes a little bit of a backseat. You open up as much time as is practically possible, uh, and that happens whenever you kind of realize the company needs to go to a new phase now. It's going to be a radical new stage. You want to solve something new. You want to take some time, just meet some people, understand, read, and try a bunch of new things, innovate a bunch of new, including new org structures, new hiring, uh,
Mhm.
and new vision statements in the company. So depending on which phase the company is, either it's a fairly disciplined calendar, or it's a very busy but chaotic calendar, or it's a fairly lightweight calendar with a fair bit of open time.
Gotcha. And are you an early riser? What time do you wake up? What time do you go to bed?
Not super early riser, 6:30 I would say, uh, and I like clearing a bunch of stuff in the night, so I'll continue, but not super late either. We'll wrap up before 12
Mhm.
on almost all days. Uh, I like my coffee, including late in the night. So typically, people would catch me, especially if I'm in the 0 to 1 wala stage. People would catch me quite often in coffee shops in Kodmangla HSR, very, very, very frequently in those
Mhm.
phases. So I'm sitting in coffee shops and I'm reading a lot. I'm writing a lot, but few meetings. But otherwise, not a very early riser. Little bit of a health routine and yeah, work till the night.
Gotcha. And Tarun, let's say money and
Mm.
attention are not needed anymore. So let's say you have enough resources, you have enough time, you have enough money. And for the time being, maybe it's post Aether, what would you work on?
It's got to be something in the energy space. We remain massive believers that that's going to be the underlying story of our lifetimes. We believe that we believe civilization moves forward only when it is able to access a 10x source of energy, starting from the discovery of fire to the steam engine, and then ultimately discovery of fossil fuel and the internal combustion engine. It's only when you are able to discover and access a 10x cheaper source of energy, that's when civilization moves forward. And we think in the last 50, 70 years, civilized world hasn't moved forward on this. So we've been juicing out efficiencies out of everything else. I think the next big leap would be when we are all able to 10x or even 100x our energy access, for which cost of energy has to fall dramatically. So if it's not electric vehicles, we will be working on likely, very likely, decentralized energy production and storage. We think that's where a lot of work is required to solve the fundamental energy problem.
Gotcha. You're all in clean tech energy space. And Tarun, if you could invite three people,
Hmm.
dead or alive, to a dinner, who would they be and why?
This question needs thinking. I have not thought about it. Uh, I think one thought just going in my mind is one of the original Semicon guys, maybe Andy Groove or maybe somebody even before him, but Andy Groove for sure. I don't think I've read about a better operator ever. Uh, I would say uh, maybe one of the HP guys, either Hewlett or Packard. I don't think I've read about somebody who's built a company better. The HP way is just legendary, and a lot of what we've thought about has come as an inspiration from them. Uh, who would be the third person? Uh, Maybe somebody like, if you could make him talk, maybe somebody like an Elon Musk. Uh, yeah, if you could make him talk, yeah, I think that'd be a third good person. Yeah.
Have you interacted with him?
No.
Gotcha. Interesting guy. And Tarun, I know you as, let's say Musk of India. What do your friends know you for? Who are you outside of work?
Uh, Coffee, board games, and a very clean guy. So in my friend group, I'm known for being the guy walking around with a vacuum cleaner multiple times a day. So these three things there, and generally, I think many people will remember me as being somebody who's uh, who's pretty okay. Not stubborn is not the right word, but what's the right word? Uh, I like a good struggle. I like a good struggle. I like a worthwhile struggle. Uh,
Hmm.
so maybe that. Yeah.
Gotcha. You just have a different DNA, man. Beast, just being at it. Tarun, thank you so much. I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much for doing it. Really appreciate it.
Sure. It was really fun talking to you, and thanks for having me over.